Jesus tended not to be a violent or angry person. But one day, he overturned the tables outside of the temple. Was there any other way for him to make his voice, God's voice, heard? Around 400 AD, Amma Syncletica relinquished her wealth in Alexandria to move with her disabled sister to the desert wilderness. Living as a hermit, she found her voice and her insight, which came from God. A community of women grew up around her, and she was revered for her wisdom and wise counsel. Did she have to move? Did she have to leave her home to be able to focus on a life with God and the wisdom and teaching that arose within her in that very austere environment? I think she did. And she was, in her own way, a warrior, not in the soldier sense of the word, but in that determined, strong, brave, going against the grain warrior. A warrior doesn't simply fight, but needs first to know for what he or she stands. A warrior, in the God sense of the word, needs to sense God's presence deep within and to see the world around us clearly. In yoga, the warrior pose is still and strong. It looks easy. Just bend your knees, hold your arms out and still. But then try it. Staying still and hard is strong, and it is critical to warriors. Ask any hunter. The desert mothers and fathers taught about the need to renounce our prior lives and to even renounce our thoughts. What? I like my thoughts. I treasure my thoughts. It takes thoughts to do what I do. And yet, sometimes thoughts become obsessions and they take over. I had a difficult employer. The job itself was rewarding, but the relationship with the boss, not only was I working for a difficult personality, but I let that person take up residence in my heart and mind. After work and on weekends, my mind was replaying what happened or what might happen, sucking up precious time and emotional energy. It wasn't worth it. It takes the focus and energy of a warrior to preserve our minds, our hearts, and our time for what really matters. To say no to the things that get in the way of what really matters, so we can say yes to what matters. So often our worries and anxieties flow round and round in our heads, paralyzing us or distracting us from the people in front of us or the beauty of the day. Where is that line between staying informed about the pandemic or the politics, and when does it become an exhausting, soul-draining, distracting obsession that hides the most important things from our vision? I think it takes some solitude and some quiet to discern our own gifts and priorities so that we are focused on what matters most. Preserving our energy for those things takes laser-like focus. Amma Syncletica, strong, warrior woman, knew that she was called to let go of the distraction of wealth and to follow God wholeheartedly. She found in that life pain and smoke, followed by a holy refiner's fire, followed by joy. Her courage and her clarity enabled her to follow her own path, and others were drawn to her. Today, whether we are 10 or 95, we are called to find deep within us our own strong warrior nature, not that which causes us to lash out against others or against ourselves, but the strong, wise part of ourselves that helps us to creatively prioritize and maintain the space in our calendars and brains and hearts for what is most important. I so respect the people who know their priorities and clearly say no to things that are good, so that they can say yes to the things that deeply feed their souls and those around them. I respect the people who say no so they can spend time with their families, or so they are not overwhelmed, or so they can complete the project they dream of completing. We are in a time of profound change and fear, when we need to make space for the strong inner spark that lies deep within. If we look beyond the headlines, beyond the supposed thought leaders, there is a resurgence of creativity and love which emerges when we dare to think outside the box. I don't think that we find solutions from working harder and doing what we've always done with more vigor, particularly now. Sometimes, often, we need to simply sit back, step back, and to know what we do not know, and to trust that we will find our way. When I let loud politicians or difficult bosses or even brilliant church growth experts take up long-term residence in my brain, I get anxious. I get overwhelmed. I lose sense of my connection to God and the gifts I may be able to offer. When I start reacting to every news story or every new idea for worship, I lose my own sense of perspective, and I don't have the bandwidth left to focus on the gifts I have to share, the gifts that we, as the Broad Bay Congregational United Church of Christ, have to share. Businesses, large and small, are making huge creative shifts to survive and to thrive. Whether restaurants doing takeout, whether people finding ways to support local farmers and fishermen. In Waldoboro, so many people, local businesses, local people have stepped up to feed those who are hungry. It's interesting that even in churches, we who claim belief in the power of the Spirit to make all things new still tend to worship and organize the way we did 200 years ago. But today, we are building digital communities in new and creative ways. To be a warrior is not to do harm to yourself or to constantly judge others with anger. It is not to simply react to what's happening beyond us. Sometimes it is to stand still and strong until we become clear about our priorities, and then carefully, strategically, lovingly act out of that which is deep within us, where our God-given gifts and the world's needs intersect. We are called to spend time in prayer and reflection, whether we do that with formal prayer practices, long walks in the woods, time on the water, in the garden, or watching the birds. We need that still, strong, quiet. And then, in God's time, let us act for love and justice. Amen.